Welcome to the Discernment Drop, where we engage source material with some real rigor, cut through the cultural noise, and try to find some clarity, even when, it means confronting some pretty uncomfortable truths.
Precisely. And today we are observing a widespread modern phenomenon that is just begging for, I think, the analytical scalpel of what you might call Swiftian satire.
Oh, absolutely.
We're looking at a highly asymmetric moral diagnosis. Our society has become, well, remarkably adept, even obsessive, at cataloging the failings of one gender. At the same time, it's developed this kind of cultural aphasia when it comes to the other.
It really is a moral curiosity, isn't it? I mean, we've built this enormous, brightly lit scaffold of accountability for men.
Complete with training modules.
Yes, exactly. With this whole vocabulary designed to pinpoint every single potential misstep, labeling everything from, overconfidence to quiet competence as toxic.
Right.
And yet, right beside this massive structure of masculine correction, there's this serene, untouched, perfectly manicured garden of feminine moral immunity.
And that immunity, that deafening silence, is the untouchable topic we have to get into today. Toxic femininity. We are talking about the destructive patterns of sin and manipulation that are, perpetrated by women.
And the methods, according to our source material, are just subtler.
Subtler, more networked, and often, frankly, far more successful because they are culturally invisible.
The irony is just, it's impossibly thick. We have culturally fixated on the visible, the blunt, the direct aggressions often associated with men.
The things that lead to a fist fight.
Right, the things that lead to physical fights or, overt dominance. But we completely ignore the covert operations of feminine sin, which tend toward, psychological and social destruction.
So if a man is competitive, he's a patriarchal oppressor. If he's stoic, he's emotionally unavailable and toxic.
And God forbid he handles adversity without a public emotional collapse, because then he's apparently just denying his trauma.
We're going to be examining this profound cultural inconsistency through the really sharp lens of a piece titled Toxic Femininity: The Ethics of Accountability. It's a deep analysis provided by Pastor John Widdifield for Remnant Church and Online Ministries.
And Pastor John's argument is that the culture has created this utterly unsustainable double standard.
It really is.
So before we jump into this, I will say this is a necessary discussion, but it's definitely a challenging one. You might want to settle in. This is not surface-level stuff.
Yeah.
This is where we attempt to find that logos-level truth in a very, very noisy world.
Right. Our mission today is to explore Widdifield's central assertion, which is that women wound and manipulate too, but they manage to execute this damage with, and I'm quoting him here, better PR and a prettier Instagram filter.
Prettier Instagram filter, wow.
And we intend to rigorously explore the mechanics of that PR machine and really demonstrate why accountability has to be universal.
Okay, let's unpack Pastor John's initial thesis, which is this asymmetry of accountability. He states that the prevailing cultural narrative, it acts as if men are the sole gender capable of initiating damage.
Or even harboring malicious intent.
Exactly. He has that wonderfully cutting line. As if testosterone alone invented war, pride, and loud chewing.
That satirical exaggeration, it serves such a critical purpose. It immediately spotlights this fundamental moral contradiction in how our modern society processes failure and fault. We have to analyze this unbalanced assessment deeply.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, when a man exhibits a damaging trait, let's say arrogance or emotional distance or physical aggression, society instantly assigns him a problem.
A problem.
Yes. This is seen as a flaw in his essential nature, something that requires immediate systemic correction, often through, public shaming or some kind of mandatory re-education.
Right. But the crucial distinction here, the one that establishes the entire power imbalance, is what happens when a woman exhibits a damaging trait, whether it's manipulation or passive aggression or even just excessive narcissism.
Well then, she is rarely assigned a problem. Instead, her behavior is culturally reframed and she's assigned a reason.
A reason. That's the key.
That's the key. Her failure is not treated as a flaw that demands correction. No, it's redefined as a justifiable response to something else. Historical oppression, unaddressed trauma, or some systemic failure by society, which, let's be honest, usually means a failure by men.
So it's not her fault.
It's never her fault. This framing requires not correction, but public validation, empathy, and external structural adjustment.
So, to put it simply, The man is morally culpable, and he needs to repent, while the woman is morally innocent, and she needs to be affirmed.
Exactly. This moral framework creates what we might call a theological system of female innocence by
A
default.
default setting of innocent.
It is. By shifting the locus of causality outward, she is rarely the agent of sin, but perpetually the victim of circumstance. And you have to understand this cultural permission slip grants a tremendous and frankly unearned power. The ability to inflict damage without having to bear the moral burden of accountability.
And Pastor John notes that while masculinity is put under this intense scrutiny, constantly analyzed and diagnosed, toxic femininity is out here doing parkour through society like a reality TV ninja.
I love that image.
That imagery of parkour it's perfect. It suggests agility, evasion, a conscious effort to bypass any known obstacles.
It's a perfect metaphor for covert aggression. I mean, just compare the two.
Yeah.
Toxic masculinity, it tends to be blunt, direct. It leaves recognizable, undeniable rubble.
You can see the damage.
You can see it. A man who shouts or dominates a conversation or punches a wall, his fault is immediately visible, it's physical, it's easy to document. The legal system, HR departments, social media, they know exactly where to point.
Whereas the parkour ninja,
The parkour ninja avoids the direct line of sight entirely. Her aggression is indirect. A whisper, a strategic rumor, a perfectly timed withdrawal of affection, or a reputation just subtly damaged on social media.
it's almost impossible to prove.
It is. It's difficult to spot, it's harder to trace, and it's nearly impossible to prove in a court of public opinion, especially when that public opinion is already preconditioned to view her as the default victim.
So this cultural blindness, this asymmetry of accountability,
Yeah.
it has to have devastating systemic consequences, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if we live in a society where the errors of one gender are constantly magnified and punished, yet the equally destructive errors of the other gender remain invisible, how can we possibly achieve true societal repair or, genuine relational reconciliation?
We can't. It's impossible. We've established a fundamentally dishonest foundation for everything. You end up with one gender man caught in this perpetual state of performing repentance for generalized sin and often feeling cynical and unjustly accused because of it.
And the other gender?
Women, in this model, remain in a perpetual state of justification, which leads to moral complacency and relational evasion. Genuine relational honesty, it requires both parties to stand under the same measure of objective truth and admit fault. If one party holds cultural immunity, the entire relational contract is broken. And that doesn't foster equality, it fosters resentment.
Okay, now we have to move into the rigorous analysis from the source material, the 4 archetypes of toxic femininity. And this is where the satire really needs to serve the truth. We're treating these figures not as, mere cultural quirks, but as genuine relational and social hazards that undermine the common good.
This is serious stuff.
It is. Let's start with the first, the one that grants immediate power. Horsewoman number 1, the high priestess of perpetual victimhood.
The high priestess. She is the archetype of power through grievance. Her defining characteristic is the game. The fundamental refusal to accept the reality of personal responsibility. She has realized that in our current cultural climate, the fastest and most efficient route to positional power is to claim the status of victim.
Effectively choosing, as Pastor John puts it, to weaponize tears.
And that weapon is horrifyingly efficient in modern discourse, isn't it?
Frighteningly so.
It operates with a speed and an efficiency that is just unmatched by any logical defense. The moment a man is confronted with highly visible public emotional distress tears, visible trauma, highly vocalized sadness, the cultural default immediately registers him as the aggressor and her as the casualty.
Instantly.
He's instantly put on the defense against the charge of causing the distress. She gains the moral high ground immediately, regardless of the objective facts of the dispute.
And that is the moral inversion that Widdifield's text really focuses on. The act of rejecting personal accountability is what grants her positional power, her sadness, her perceived weakness. It becomes his insurmountable burden of proof.
And the psychological payoff, what they sometimes call secondary gain, it's enormous. By framing herself as perpetually wounded, she justifies any aggressive, manipulative, or entitled behavior that follows.
Right. The logic is, I'm behaving badly because I'm hurt.
And that becomes a justification for absolutely everything. And because the system has already decided that men have problems requiring correction and women have reasons requiring validation, well, if a man shows legitimate anger or frustration, it's just proof of his fundamental toxicity.
But if a woman shows the same emotions,
If a woman shows legitimate sadness or anger, it's proof of his aggression. The moral equation is tragically fixed, and it's leveraged by the high priestess to control both the narrative and the relational outcomes.
It's an unbreakable loop.
Almost.
Let's turn to horsewoman number 2, the queen of emotional manipulation. Pastor John offers that phenomenal contrast between masculine and feminine aggression. Men punch walls, women punch reputations.
And that distinction is absolutely critical to understanding the preferred methodologies of conflict.
What's the core difference?
The core difference is kinetic versus strategic. Masculine aggression, it often seeks a physical or immediate dominance. Win the fight now. Feminine aggression is built for endurance. It seeks control through relational leverage and a slow, steady psychological erosion.
Okay, so let's dissect the specific tactics of the queen of emotional manipulation. The text describes them as a masterclass in psychological warfare applied to the domestic sphere.
They really are.
Let's start with the silent treatment. Because this isn't just, someone taking time to cool down. This is a deliberate campaign.
Oh, absolutely. This is the tactic Widdifield describes as silent treatment so cold it could keep ice cream solid in the Sahara. It is weaponized absence. It's sustained for the sole purpose of inflicting psychological pressure.
And what's the goal?
The goal is to force the other party, usually the man, into surrender. To capitulate and apologize, simply to end the unbearable tension, even if he has no idea what he is apologizing for. It is a calculated removal of essential relational affirmation. It's holding the connection itself hostage.
And then there's the notorious tactic that I think frustrates nearly every relationship dynamic.
If you don't know why I'm mad, I won't tell you.
Ah, yes. This is perhaps the most insidious form of relational control. It is a demand for psychic omniscience.
You have to be a mind reader. You do. The queen is not seeking resolution because resolution would require mutual accountability. She is demanding that her partner prove his love, his devotion, his alignment with her internal subjective truth by correctly guessing the unstated grievance.
And if he fails the test?
If he fails, it just proves his failure as a partner. It prevents any dialogue or negotiation entirely.
This behavior is defined brilliantly in the text as weaponized ambiguity. The text calls it the final form of relational sabotage.
Because ambiguity prevents resolution. You cannot apologize for an unstated crime. It keeps the relationship in the state of suspended moral debt until the partner just breaks under the pressure.
So the satirical observation here is what?
The observation is profound. Psychological warfare, the domain of the queen of emotional manipulation, is often far more effective than direct confrontation. It erodes trust, self-worth, and stability over years, leaving deeper, less visible scars than a physical blow. A civilization can recover from a riot faster than it can recover from 1,000 broken, psychologically manipulated families.
That's a powerful point. Okay, moving to horsewoman number 3, the sisterhood of selective empowerment. This is the figure who loudly advocates for equality, but only in the spheres where it benefits her.
Right. Career autonomy, social independence, freedom from traditional constraints.
But when the risks or, the unpleasant labor surfaces, the demands shift immediately back to traditional protection.
And this is the core hypocrisy that's undermining genuine equality in modern relationships. The defining philosophy is hyper-independence until life gets inconvenient.
Widdifield's text highlights the painful truth of this through some specific examples. The woman who asserts, "I don't need a man,"
but still requires him to kill the spider, fix the Wi-Fi, carry the heavy box, and pay the bills.
It's the demand for all the benefits of independence, autonomy, self-determination, control over one's body and career, without accepting any of the corresponding liabilities.
The liabilities of risk, of unpleasant labor, or the financial burden that is inherent in full independence.
So to explore this satirically, as the source does, what would a truly equal division of labor and risk even look like?
Well, if we adhere strictly to a principle of 50-50, then if she demands full autonomy in the emotional sphere, she must accept full autonomy in the physical risk sphere.
So if there's a spider?
If there's a spider, a true feminist must assert, I have the agency to deal with this arthropod myself. Or perhaps they could split the pest control duty. If the toilet breaks, 50% of the plumbing responsibility falls to her.
But that's not what happens.
Not with the sisterhood, no. She insists on a custom contract where the man retains the traditional masculine duty of protection and provision, while she retains the modern feminine right to selective self-determination. It's a completely one-sided contract guaranteed by the cultural safety net.
And finally, that brings us to horsewoman number 4, the diva of eternal adolescence. This is the 38-year-old with a mortgage, with children, and a spouse who still insists she is still figuring herself out.
This archetype represents a kind of chronic developmental stagnation. It's the refusal to exit the liminal space of youth. We have to translate the meaning of still figuring herself out.
So what does it mean in practice?
In practice, it translates to I want responsibility-free romance, endless options for self-expression, Instagram-worthy trips, unlimited emotional validation, and absolutely no consequences for my choices.
Pastor John concisely defines this phenomenon as, and I love this, basically the entire Disney Channel but with Chardonnay.
It perfectly captures the essence of this cultural drive toward an endless, curated fantasy life.
And this perpetual adolescence is fundamentally destructive, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Adulthood requires the acceptance of limits. It requires closure on certain foundational questions like who am I and what am I responsible for? It demands the prioritization of covenant commitments over immediate self-gratification.
But the deep.
The diva insists the self is an ever-changing art project that must not be constrained by the needs of children, spouses, or financial reality. And this leads to profound relational exhaustion in her partner and incredible instability for her children.
So given the destructive nature of this stagnation, we have to apply the proper Swiftian solution, right?
Yeah.
A mock-serious societal policy to address the crisis.
We must. To prevent the economic and relational strain caused by this chronic developmental stagnation, we should mandate that all citizens must legally declare themselves figured out by age 30.
Legally declared.
Yes. Past that point, any claim of being on a journey of self-discovery would result in mandatory fines or perhaps the loss of voting rights, as they are clearly not prepared to make stable decisions for the larger polity.
That's sharp.
Well, if we mandate maturity in men via constant criticism, we have to impose the same mandate on women via cultural expectation. Otherwise, the entire social structure buckles under the weight of perpetual teenage angst.
Okay, we must now pivot from this sharp cultural polemic and satire to the cold, hard empirical receipts. The strength of Pastor John's critique really lies in its grounding in psychological and sociological research.
Yes, these patterns are not merely anecdotal, they are measurable behaviors.
This transition is crucial, I think, for the discerning listener. We have to demonstrate that this observation of covert feminine aggression isn't just, a comedic opinion, but a psychological reality documented in academic journals.
Exactly. Let's start with the aggression data that really defines the methodologies of toxic femininity.
So the source cites the work of Crick and Grott-Peter in the journal Child Development, and they established that women use indirect aggression far more frequently than men.
And we need to define this precisely for the listener. Indirect aggression, it's often termed relational aggression. It is the calculated harm to relationships or social status.
How is it delivered?
It's delivered through third parties, through rumor spreading, social ostracization, or deliberate exclusion. Crucially, the target often cannot directly identify the source or the method of the attack, which makes any kind of defense impossible.
So this is the psychological mechanism behind the queen of emotional manipulation strategy of punching reputations.
It's the scientific basis for it, yes.
And why is this methodology so much harder to track than physical aggression? And why does the research focus on it so heavily?
Because it operates in the shadow of cultural invisibility. A punch leaves a bruise. A lie or a well-placed rumor leaves no physical trace. Yet it can destroy a person's livelihood and social standing completely.
Our systems aren't built for it.
Our legal and HR systems are built to prosecute direct physical evidence. Indirect aggression bypasses these formal structures entirely. It operates via the informal but incredibly powerful networks of social perception and gossip. And the studies validate that girls and women are trained and socialized to be highly effective in these spheres of covert relational control.
Expanding on that, Widdifield source material also draws upon a review by Archer in the Psychological Bulletin, which found that female bullying is characterized as psychologically harsher and reputation-based.
And this addresses the longevity and the severity of the damage. A physical injury, it heals, and usually the perpetrator is identified. Reputation-based aggression, however, is long-term, it's psychological, and it's systemic.
To have your reputation ruined.
It's to have your social operating system corrupted. It affects your ability to get jobs, to form new relationships, to maintain your own self-worth. In a networked, reputation-driven society like ours, social ruin is often far more debilitating in the long run than any minor physical injury.
So the research suggests a reason for this preference.
It suggests that because women typically manage the social ecosystem of a community, their aggression is naturally directed toward damaging the target's standing within that community. It's their domain.
And this research provides the empirical evidence for Pastor John's assertion. Men may start physical wars, but women start social ones, and social wars last longer.
They do, because social wars are fundamentally wars over meaning, over trust, and over community alignment. They're fought with intangible weapons, perception, rumor, emotional leverage, which resist any simple categorization or formal resolution. They leave these systemic scars that affect entire families and friend groups, not just the two combatants.
So the methodologies of toxic femininity are?
They're specifically designed for enduring subtle destruction across a wide relational landscape.
And we have to connect these proven historical social tactics to our modern digital platforms. This aggression has been amplified exponentially by the internet.
Oh, without a doubt.
The Pew Research data, cited in the source, reinforces this claim that women dominate cancel culture mobs and online shaming patterns.
This is the perfect 21st century scaling mechanism for reputation-based aggression. I mean, the internet is the ideal environment for the queen of emotional manipulation. It allows for mass, instantaneous, and often anonymous shaming. It enables an individual aggressor to leverage the collective power of a digital mob.
This gives indirect aggressors.
What? It provides them with maximum kinetic social damage while shielding them from almost all accountability.
So what was once confined to, say, a neighborhood gossip circle is now broadcast globally, destroying careers and personal lives with a few clicks and algorithmic amplification.
And this exponential scaling means the power imbalance is even greater than before. An individual woman can leverage a network of thousands to inflict reputational harm on a single man, or another woman for that matter, all while claiming she is merely speaking her truth or that it's activism.
And the language provides cover.
The linguistic defense, the semantic rebranding we're about to discuss, it provides the moral cover for the highly efficient, industrialized damage of mass digital shaming. This power demands rigorous inclusion in our moral calculus, yet it is consistently dismissed as merely emotional expression.
Finally, we have to look at the structural collapse of domestic covenants. The source material references a shocking statistic from Rosenfeld and Rosler in the American Sociological Review. It finds that a staggering 70% of divorces are initiated by women.
That statistic is a powerful receipt, isn't it, regardless of the interpretation you apply to it. And we have to explore the two conflicting interpretations thoroughly.
Okay, what's the first one?
On one hand, advocates suggest this statistic simply reflects female empowerment. Women are no longer financially dependent and are finally able to refuse to tolerate unsatisfactory or poor marriages. They're exercising freedom and agency.
A positive interpretation.
A very positive one, yes.
But the alternative interpretation, the one that's supported by the analysis of the four horsewomen, it points to something a bit darker.
It suggests the profound societal unwillingness to commit to covenant. If the diva of eternal adolescence is seeking responsibility-free romance, validation, and no consequences, then marriage, which is the foundational structure of consequences, mutual responsibility, and shared sacrifice, becomes an intolerable restraint.
So the high rate of female initiation could reflect a cultural shift.
It may reflect a fundamental cultural shift away from covenant thinking toward a purely contractual, self-serving individualism.
And this raises these central, profound questions suggested by Widdifield's critique. What is the true societal cost of absolute relational freedom?
Well, if the ability to unilaterally exit a covenant is concentrated overwhelmingly in one gender, it fundamentally shifts the power dynamic within that relationship. The male partner lives under the constant potential threat of unilateral dissolution, and that affects his willingness to invest, to commit, or even to hold his partner accountable.
And on a larger scale.
When the family structure, the very foundation of social stability, is undermined by this high rate of unilateral exit, the stability of civilization itself is called into question. The empirical data strongly suggests a deep structural instability being driven by the relational choices of one gender.
Okay, we now arrive at what I think is the most sophisticated part of Pastor John's analysis. The cultural construction of female innocence, which he details in his prophecy section.
This is the core of it.
It is. This is not just about bad behavior. This is about the cultural linguistic strategy that has successfully immunized one half of the population from objective moral critique.
This requires a rigorous, almost theological analysis of the semantic shift that has occurred. Western culture has co-opted the language of psychology and trauma to create a new linguistic toolkit.
A rebranding effort.
A rebranding of traditional concepts of sin, yes, all to ensure that female accountability is perpetually externalized.
Okay, let's meticulously break down the four essential redefinitions he offers. Let's start with failure. Traditionally, failure was an opportunity for humility, learning, and growth. Now, failure is redefined as trauma.
And when failure, the natural result of poor choices or limited ability, is redefined as trauma, it necessitates external care and completely absolves the individual of internal responsibility.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure, if my lack of financial discipline leads me to bankruptcy in this new model, it is not my failure. It's my financial trauma. It's a thing that was done to me by a predatory system. I shift instantly from being the agent of the choice to the passive victim requiring soothing and validation. This immediately engages the high priestess archetype.
Okay. Next, a simple mistake or a minor error in judgment is redefined as oppression.
This is a powerful move that externalizes the error entirely. Any misstep, whether it's in a career, a social interaction, or a personal relationship, is immediately assigned to a broader systemic issue.
So instead of, I made a bad choice,
It becomes, I didn't make a bad choice in how I treated my friend. I was oppressed by the societal expectation that women must be agreeable. This is a complete evasion of consequence, justifying the mistake by framing it as some kind of noble resistance to a malevolent force.
and the most morally corrosive rebranding, as Widdifield argues, sin is redefined as self-care.
This is the ultimate moral sleight of hand. The selfish act, the violation of a commitment, the indulgence of vice, or the unilateral destruction of a covenant, it is all justified under the sacred umbrella of self-care.
So if I abandon my commitments,
If you abandon your commitments or harm someone to pursue immediate pleasure, you have not sinned. You have engaged in a necessary act of personal preservation. This linguistic maneuver transforms moral obligation into a self-sacrificial burden, making the sin itself a virtuous necessity for the preservation of the self. This directly fuels the diva of eternal adolescence.
and finally, a selfish choice is redefined simply as my truth.
This is the pivot from objective, externally verifiable reality to subjective, internally validated feeling. If a choice hurts others, that pain is secondary or perhaps even irrelevant because the ultimate moral arbiter is my immediate emotional need, my truth.
That's unarguable.
It is. This linguistic strategy effectively immunizes one half of the population from any objective, external, or traditional moral critique. You cannot argue against my truth without immediately being labeled an oppressor or, a denier of the individual's lived experience.
These four linguistic shifts are the cultural machinery that grants absolute moral immunity. And this leads us directly to the logos-level truth that Pastor John insists upon. You cannot heal a culture if half the culture refuses to repent.
And philosophically, it's undeniable. If accountability is not universal, it is not quality. If we are serious about building a balanced co-ed civilization based on mutual respect and commitment, both men and women must stand equally exposed to the judgment of objective, moral truth.
Yet we are deeply entrenched in this profound societal paradox, aren't we?
No.
We are constantly demanding that men grow up, that they be mature, responsible, financially stable, covenant-keeping, emotionally intelligent.
While simultaneously celebrating the adolescent impulses of women, encouraging them to pursue immediate gratification in the name of self-care.
This developmental imbalance is socially crippling.
It has to be. A society cannot flourish when one half of the population is mandated into maturity and the other half is celebrated for arrested development, all while wielding these powerful tools of indirect aggression and victimhood.
So true equality requires more.
True equality is not cheap or easy. It requires equal moral responsibility, equal acceptance of blame, and equal submission to the uncomfortable, cutting truth that we are all flawed image bearers.
And this returns us to the fundamental necessary truth that's often obscured by all the cultural noise. Women are not, as Pastor John notes, fragile angels or porcelain victims, or uniquely righteous by default.
The theological conclusion has to be clear. Women are image bearers of God. They are capable of both breathtaking goodness and breathtaking wickedness, just like men. The cure is not found in blame or in denial, but in the honest, objective application of truth.
And if we can understand that shared capacity for both virtue and vice, the path to genuine repentance and healing can finally open up. The final conclusion from the source material remains the most compelling. The truth cuts all of us because it heals all of us.
And that prevents the toxicity of either gender from becoming culturally dominant and destructive.
This has been the Discernment Drop, and we have spent significant time rigorously analyzing the untouchable topic that really must be addressed for relational and cultural health.
I think we have.
The core takeaway, driven by Widdifield's source material, is that accountability is the absolute prerequisite for true equality. Focusing moral critique exclusively on the failings of one gender is not just unfair, it is a formula for societal and familial collapse.
And the systemic result of this asymmetry is a profound moral complacency. It results in relational exhaustion for men and a kind of chronic developmental stagnation for women. By understanding the moral imbalance created by this selective application of accountability and by rigorously analyzing the distinct methodologies of feminine sin, we can finally begin the work of reconciliation. And that requires truth for all parties.
We leave you now with a final, provocative thought. Something for you, the astute listener, to mull over and explore as you continue your own discernment this week.
We have established, through empirical data, that women initiate social warfare through reputation-based aggression. And they also unilaterally initiate the vast majority of divorces, which constitutes a systemic destruction of the foundational relational covenant.
Two very significant data points.
They are. So given this pattern of behavior, the preference for indirect aggression in the social sphere and unilateral destruction in the domestic sphere, what does this suggest about the ultimate nature of relational power in the modern era?
That's the question.
Is this sophisticated indirect aggression, which systematically destabilizes homes and reputations, actually more destabilizing to the long-term health of civilization and future generations than the direct kinetic aggression that our culture spends all its energy condemning in men?
Consider that question deeply as you navigate the noise this week. This has been your Discernment Drop.
The conversation nobody wanted to have, but the one we desperately needed.
Christ is king. Still is.